The clock strikes midnight, and the veil between the known and the unknown grows thin. Welcome to Midnight Terrors, where the horrifying and the unimaginable collide. Tonight, fear isn't just a feeling, it's your only companion. Are you ready to step into the darkness? Let's begin. The protagonist, Emma, a journalist recovering from a recent trauma, receives a tip about the mysterious crop, known for bringing immense prosperity but with rumors of dark origins. Her editor convinces her to visit the village for a story, emphasizing its bizarre history. Locals never leave, outsiders never stay, and every harvest season, one person disappears. Emma arrives and immediately feels unwelcome. Villagers glance at her with suspicion, murmuring about strangers disturbing the balance. She encounters Thomas, a weathered old farmer with hollowed cheeks and eyes that seem to carry the weight of buried secrets. He reluctantly offers her a room in his creaky, decaying house, the wooden floorboards groaning like they're alive. As he hands her the rusted key, his fingers tremble slightly, and his voice drops to a grave whisper. "Leave before the harvest festival. Don't ignore this warning." When she hesitates, questioning his meaning, his gaze locks onto hers, cold and unblinking. His voice grows jagged, almost a hiss, as he mutters, "The crop, it doesn't just feed on the soil. This land, it knows you're here. It'll demand its tribute soon enough." His words linger, heavy and suffocating, as if the very walls of the house were listening. The festival preparations have an unsettling edge. Children weave wreaths of wheat with unnerving precision, their small hands moving mechanically, their faces blank as if in a trance. Adults string lanterns along the fields, their lips moving in whispered chants too faint to understand, their eyes darting nervously to the horizon, as if expecting something to appear. As Emma wanders the village, she notices strange, jagged symbols carved deep into trees and barns, their shapes resembling ancient runes. The carvings seem to pulse faintly in the dimming light, as if the wood itself is alive, twisting under her gaze. Determined to uncover the truth, she interviews Mara, a young woman with hollow eyes and trembling hands. Mara hesitates, her voice barely a whisper as she says, "No one grows the crop willingly, it grows us." Before Emma can press for more, Mara's parents burst onto the scene, their faces twisted in terror. "Stop tempting fate," they shout, yanking Mara away with such force it nearly dislocates her arm. As they retreat, Mara glances back at Emma, her wide eyes filled with fear, and something else, a warning unspoken. Emma visits the abandoned church at the edge of the village and finds a hidden diary belonging to a former priest. The diary recounts a chilling origin. Decades ago, during a brutal drought that left the earth cracked and barren, a desperate farmer named Ezekiel struck a deal with a shadowy stranger dressed in black. The stranger's voice was smooth, his words laced with promise, bountiful harvests in exchange for one thing: loyalty. Ezekiel agreed, sealing the village's fate with a handshake under a blood-red sunset. What followed defied reason. The crops began to sprout overnight, thick and vibrant, as if the soil had been fed something far richer than water. But prosperity came at a cost. The priest's entries grew more frantic, describing livestock going mad, their eyes wide with terror before they turned on each other. During harvest moons, villagers would enter eerie trances, their bodies moving as if guided by invisible strings. The final entry, written in trembling script, delivered the gravest warning. Do not trust the land, it hungers, it always hungers. If the land itself demands loyalty, what do you think it takes to earn its favor? And if the crops truly feed on more than the soil, what has already been sacrificed to keep them growing? That night, Emma is jolted awake by faint whispers outside her window, too low to make out but too deliberate to ignore. As she peers through the glass, her breath catches. Shadows move through the fields, but not like people. They glide, unnaturally fluid, their shapes twisting as though the moonlight itself is warping around them. Her gaze drifts to the scarecrow in Thomas's field. Its crude frame looms tall, arms outstretched toward the sky, but something feels wrong. Each time she looks away, even for a moment, it seems to shift, its head tilting, its posture changing, its hollow eyes now fixed directly on her window. The next day, while exploring the fields, Emma stumbles upon a strange, blackened patch of earth. Nothing grows there, the soil charred and cracked as if burned by fire, yet no signs of flames remain. The ground is littered with animal bones, bleached white and arranged in patterns that make her stomach churn. She turns to Thomas, demanding answers, but his face hardens with fear. "You don't want to know," he mutters, his voice trembling. His hands grip her shoulders, desperate. "Leave before the harvest begins. Once it starts, there's no stopping it." As Emma steps back, she notices his hands are shaking, not with age, but with the weight of some terrible secret he dares not speak. What could be so horrifying that even Thomas, a man hardened by decades, fears to utter it aloud? And why does the scarecrow in the distance seem closer than before? Despite warnings, Emma attends the festival. The mood is unnervingly celebratory, with villagers chanting and dancing around a massive bonfire. Emma's heart pounds as she spots Mara being dragged toward a roaring bonfire, her wrists and ankles bound tightly with frayed ropes. Mara's muffled screams pierce the night, but the villagers seem deaf to her cries. They surround her in a slow, hypnotic march, their voices rising in a chilling chant, "Feed the soil, feed the soil." Emma pushes through the crowd, desperate to stop whatever horrifying ritual is unfolding. As she grabs Mara's arm, a sudden silence falls over the villagers. One by one, they turn to face her, their faces blank, their eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light that seems to pierce straight through her. In perfect, inhuman unison, they whisper, their voices echoing like a hiss carried by the wind. "The pact must be honored." Quick pause. Help spread the word. A simple recommendation from you to a friend helps us reach more people and lets us keep creating content you love. Thanks for being part of this journey. The fire erupts violently, flames leaping higher than they should, their glow painting grotesque, writhing shadows across the villagers. Emma stumbles back, her breath catching in her throat as she notices the unnatural way their bodies move. Their hands twitch and spasm, the joints bending as though controlled by invisible strings. Heads jerk to the side, tilting at impossible angles, necks cracking with a sickening sound that makes her stomach churn. Their glowing eyes bore into her, soulless and unrelenting, and their faces stretch into unsettling grins. Too wide, too wrong. The air grows thick, heavy with the scent of burning wood and something else, something metallic and rancid. As they close in, whispering in voices that no longer sound human, the fire seems to pulse in time with their steps. Shadows twist unnaturally on the ground, forming shapes that look alive, clawing hands and gaping mouths reaching toward Emma. Her mind races with a chilling realization. If the pact is broken, the land's wrath will be unleashed, and whatever it hungers for will not stop at Mara. But then a darker thought takes hold, gnawing at her resolve. What if the villagers aren't just sacrificing Mara? What if she was drawn here to feed the soil too? The fire crackles, spitting embers into the night, and Emma's heart sinks as she sees her own shadow twist and writhe on the ground, merging with the shapes of the villagers. The land isn't just hungry, it's alive. Emma stumbles into the field, her breath ragged and her heart hammering in her chest. The tall stalks of the crop close in around her like an endless, suffocating maze. But then the whispers start, low, guttural, and filled with anguish. As she pushes forward, she sees them. Ghostly figures of villagers being dragged into the soil, their faces twisted in terror. Their hands claw desperately at the earth, but it swallows them whole, their screams muffled as the dirt closes over their heads. The ground pulses, almost breathing, as if feeding on their agony. She whirls around to flee, but her path is blocked by the scarecrow. Its stitched mouth twitches, and its straw-stuffed arms creak as they reach toward her. Its hollow eyes now glow faintly with a sickly green light. As it lurches forward, it lets out a voice, not human, but layered, as if speaking through countless mouths. "You see now, don't you?" it growls. "I am Ezekiel. I made the pact, and now I guard the curse I unleashed." The scarecrow's steps are slow but deliberate, the once ragged fabric of its clothes now flowing like shadowy tendrils. Emma sprints deeper into the field, the stalks tearing at her skin as she runs. At the heart of the field, she finds it, the source of the crop's dark power. A half-buried altar, blackened and cracked, pulsates with an unnatural energy. The surface is inscribed with symbols that burn into her mind the moment she looks at them, the same symbols she'd seen carved into trees and barns. The air around it is thick and wrong, the ground at its base oozing a viscous black substance. It dawns on her in a horrifying wave. The crop isn't wheat. It's alive, a parasitic entity, ancient and malevolent, feeding on human lives. The whispers in the air aren't the wind, but the voices of those it has consumed, crying out for freedom that will never come. As Ezekiel's cursed form looms closer, his voice deepens into a guttural roar. You cannot stop it. You cannot run. You are part of the harvest now. The altar begins to glow, the symbols blazing with unholy light. The ground beneath Emma trembles, and she realizes the field itself is waking up. Roots snake toward her feet, the soil heaving as if trying to swallow her whole. Emma is faced with one chilling choice: destroy the altar and risk unleashing something far worse, or flee and become the crop's next offering. But as the scarecrow's shadow falls over her, the question that terrifies her most is this: what if the altar isn't the source, but just the doorway? The villagers encircle Emma, their glowing eyes fixated on her like predators closing in on prey. At their center stands Thomas, his face a mask of guilt and desperation. I brought you here, he confesses, his voice trembling. I hoped you'd be strong enough to end this, but I was wrong. Emma glares at him, clutching the lantern in her hand. Then help me stop it. Thomas hesitates, his lips parting to speak, but before he can, the ground beneath their feet begins to quake. The villagers drop to their knees, chanting in unison, their voices melding into a deep, unnatural drone. From the shadows of the field, a figure emerges, cloaked in black. His face is hidden, obscured by a void-like darkness that seems to drink in the firelight. The air turns icy, and the figure's voice slithers into Emma's ears, low and commanding. You should have left when you had the chance. Emma's heart pounds as the figure steps closer, his presence suffocating. He gestures toward the altar, his shadow stretching unnaturally long. I'll give you a choice, he says, his voice resonating as if spoken by countless unseen mouths. Leave this place and forget everything you've seen, or stay and take your place among the harvest. The villagers freeze, their heads snapping toward Emma as though awaiting her decision. For a moment, doubt flickers in her mind, but then she remembers Mara's terrified screams, the sacrifices, the horror etched into the land itself. No, Emma says, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her. I'm ending this. She hurls the lantern onto the altar. The oil ignites instantly, flames racing across the surface as the ancient symbols blaze with a blinding light. The earth convulses violently, and a deafening roar tears through the air, a sound so guttural and alien it feels like the earth itself is screaming. The villagers writhe in agony, their glowing eyes fading as their bodies contort and crumble into ash. The fields ignite in a chain reaction, fire consuming the cursed crop, the flames unnaturally high and impossibly hot. The figure in black stands motionless, his shadow unraveling into wisps of smoke as the inferno engulfs him. Emma runs, the ground splitting apart beneath her feet, the entire village collapsing into a chasm of fire and ash. She doesn't stop until she's far from the blaze, her chest heaving as she watches the inferno devour everything. The once fertile land buckles inward, leaving behind a massive, smoldering crater. Weeks later, Emma publishes her story, detailing the horrors she witnessed. But the world is skeptical. Her account is dismissed as fiction, a desperate cry for attention. And yet, as she stares at the photographs she took, blackened symbols, eerie shadows, and the glowing eyes of the villagers, she knows the truth will never leave her. Late at night, she hears whispers outside her apartment window, faint but unmistakable. One phrase repeats, sending chills down her spine. The pact is never broken. The land will find you.